Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to my channel Sleepy History. Before we begin tonight's story, please tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? I love seeing sleepy souls from all around the world. And hey, don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a little comment, even emoji, to let me know you're here. Now, let your body relax. Lie down on your bed. Turn off the lights. Close your eyes. Take a slow, deep breath in, and gently let it out. Let go of the day. Let go of all thoughts. Just be here with me in this quiet moment. And as we begin tonight's journey into history, let your mind drift. Let your body rest. And slowly, gently, fall asleep with the story. Hello everyone. Tonight we explore a story where madness met marble and divinity wore a crown of dread. He was born, not in peace, but under thunder's breath. A child cloaked in empire, destiny, and omen. The gods whispered his name before he could speak it. Caligula. And Rome would never sleep soundly again. In the frost-bitten reaches of northern Germania, beneath a sky veiled in mist and war, a cry pierced the canvas of night. It was not the howl of wolves or the clatter of shields, but the sharp, insistent wail of a newborn. The legions, restless in their tents, paused. Somewhere beyond their walls of oiled leather and pine, a child was born, a child to Rome. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, but they would come to call him Caligula, the little boot, after the miniature soldier's boots he wore as he toddled through the camps. A child raised not in marble halls, but beneath the canopy of war banners, lulled to sleep not by lullabies, but by the thunder of drums and the chanting of men who bled for Rome. His mother, Agrippina the elder, fierce and noble, cradled him close. Daughter of Marcus Agrippa and Julia, granddaughter of Augustus himself, her blood was empire. His father, Germanicus, Rome's golden general, beloved by soldiers and senators alike, kissed the brow of his son with pride, never knowing how brief their time together would be. In those early days, Caligula was the child of destiny. Soldiers knelt to touch his feet. Commanders toasted his name. Around his cradle hung Roman standards, eagle crests, and shields etched with ancient victories. Some whispered that the gods themselves had carved a path for him, etched in gold and edged in blood. Yet even in infancy, the shadow crept. In the tent beside him, rumors stirred of Tiberius, the brooding emperor, and his jealous heart. Rome was no longer the republic of virtue. It had become a beast with marble skin and iron veins. Caligula's cradle was Rome's promise, and its warning. And so, the boy was swaddled in silk and steel, kissed by generals, and rocked by war. The boy who once toddled through battle camps would soon walk among ghosts. When his father, Germanicus, died under suspicious breath in Antioch, the world around young Caligula began to darken. They said it was poison, perhaps Piso, perhaps the hand of Tiberius, the emperor who had once praised Germanicus, only to fear him. Agrippina wept, but not quietly. She screamed to the heavens, to the Senate, to the people of Rome itself. My husband was murdered. And in her arms stood Caligula, wide-eyed, watching the world unravel. His soul, once warmed by campfires, was now chilled by marble silence. No longer the darling of soldiers, she was a boy surrounded by suspicion. His mother, proud and dangerous, kept him close. She showed him statues of Augustus, whispering, "This is your blood, this is your right." But Rome, for all its statues and senate steps, was not kind to sons of the fallen. Caligula, still a child, was paraded in funeral robes through streets that once cheered for his father. He saw faces turned cold. The palace gates opened not with warmth, but with caution. The house of Augustus, once home to dreams, became his gilded prison. There were no friends, only watchers, no lessons, only whispers. His sisters Drusilla, Julia, Livilla, and Agrippina the younger became his shadows, sharing his silence and fear. And yet, Caligula learned. He listened. He remembered. He watched how Tiberius ruled through silence and exile. He saw how loyalty turned to death, how laughter echoed too long in empty rooms. Even as a child, he understood. Rome did not reward goodness. It admired power, and it feared blood. Alone in echoing halls, Caligula walked past busts of men whose names carved the spine of the Republic. Caesar, Augustus, Germanicus, and he whispered them beneath his breath, as if to wake them. "I am yours," he murmured in candlelight. But even then, Rome was already deciding what it would make of him. A son of empire, or the seed of chaos. As Caligula grew, so too did Rome's suspicion. The boy's name, once sung in military camps, had become a dangerous echo in the marble corridors of power. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, was too proud, too loud, too loyal to the memory of Germanicus. Rome had no place for mourners who accused emperors. She stood in the Senate, her hands clenched around Caligula's, her voice thunderous. "My husband was slain. My sons shall not kneel." But she was met not with justice, only silence. One by one, the family of Germanicus fell. His brothers Nero and Drusus were arrested, starved, erased. Agrippina was sent to exile. And Caligula? He was taken to Capri. There, upon Tiberius's private island, Rome's future sat beside its fading present. The emperor, cold and watching, studied the boy. Tiberius, now a man broken by paranoia, ruled from cliffs and caves, seeing plots in every shadow. Caligula learned to survive not by hiding, but by becoming exactly what Tiberius wanted. He smiled. He obeyed. He listened. The other children who dared cry were silenced. Caligula stayed silent, even in nightmares. He kept a mask of calm, though inside, fear bloomed like rot. And yet, in the darkest chambers of Capri, he whispered to the marble gods. He lit candles to his father. He sharpened his memory like a blade. "I am Germanicus's son," he reminded himself. One day, Rome will remember. On Capri, Caligula saw what men became when power turned to poison. He watched as guests vanished after dinner. He saw senators bow too low and rise no more. Tiberius kept scrolls of betrayal, and the boy learned each name. They called him a survivor. But in truth, he was becoming something else. Beneath the surface of his quiet obedience, a storm gathered. Rome had stolen his mother. It had killed his father. It had tried to bury his name in exile and fear. But Caligula, the little boot, would not forget. He was not just his father's son. He was the child of empire, orphaned by it, forged by it. And he would not remain silent forever. On the jagged cliffs of Capri, surrounded by shadows and silence, the boy who once wore tiny legionary boots grew into a scholar of secrets. He learned not through lectures, but through whispers. Not in classrooms, but in chambers where betrayal dripped from every arch. Tiberius rarely spoke to him directly, yet gave him everything: scrolls, astrologers, philosophers, and spies. Some said it was trust, others said it was a test. Caligula devoured every word. He studied the lives of Julius Caesar and Augustus, not with awe, but with surgical attention. He learned how the Senate could flatter and kill, how the people could cheer you one day and curse you the next. He read about the gods, yes, but also about law, tax, punishment. He memorized lists of conspirators and how they fell. He heard tales of rebellions and how they were crushed. And he began to understand. To rule Rome was not to serve it. It was to survive it. A philosopher named Thrasyllus once told him, "The stars say you will wear the laurel, Gaius, but they do not say what it will cost." Caligula only smiled. He did not believe in fate, only in memory. And Rome had given him much to remember. His sisters, exiled or dead. His mother, starved to bones on a rocky island. His father, murdered and buried far from home. And still, he smiled. To the outside eye, He was obedient, gentle. He bowed to Tiberius. He kissed the feet of statues. He poured wine for senators. He played the perfect lamb. But within, a lion sharpened its claws. Late at night, he stood at the edge of the cliff and whispered to the wind. One day, Rome will kneel. In the frescoes of the villa, angels and gods danced on ceilings. But Caligula looked higher beyond gods, beyond men to power itself. Not the illusion Tiberius kept in scrolls and spies, but the true power, command over life and death, over cheers and silence. He learned how to smile without trust, how to speak without truth. And though still a youth, he had become something rare in Rome. A creature who understood the empire's teeth, and how to bite without being seen. The longer Caligula remained on Capri, the more he learned to wear his skin like armor. Tiberius, once a general, now a ghost among ruins, had become something more than emperor. He was a test of endurance, a living reminder that in Rome, survival meant transformation. Others wept, others broke. But Caligula endured. He smiled at the gladiatorial games that Tiberius forced him to attend. He nodded at executions. He never flinched when a senator was dragged away mid-meal. The boy became a mask, and behind it, sharpness grew. It was during this time he met Macro, the commander of the Praetorian Guard, a man who understood where power truly perched. Unlike Tiberius, Macro saw in Caligula not just a survivor, but a storm. "You're patient," Macro once whispered. "Rome will love that, until it fears it." They shared secret glances, conversations beneath arches, over empty goblets. Macro had grown weary of Tiberius's dark rule, and Caligula? He knew that time was almost ripe. Meanwhile, Caligula found strange peace in his solitude. At night, he would walk barefoot in the olive groves of Capri, whispering to the stars. "Father," he'd say, "they'll see your sun rise." No audience, no applause. Just the quiet confidence of destiny taking shape. He dreamed not of glory, but of justice, not of temples, but of remembrance. He remembered each enemy, each betrayal, and he kept his blade sheathed for now. Tiberius grew older, colder, less present. The empire whispered rumors that the emperor was already dead, ruled in name by shadows. And in those shadows, Caligula moved. He never argued, never rebelled, never refused. Because he understood something greater. Rome did not favor loud suns, it favored silent storms. And Caligula was the quiet before the tempest. Macro soon became his closest confidant, not out of love, but ambition. They were not friends, they were tools, sharp and ready. And one day, in the stillness between seasons, Caligula realized something chilling. He was no longer afraid of Tiberius. That was the moment he truly became dangerous. In the final weeks of Tiberius's life, Capri became as still as a crypt. The sea no longer sang, the wind no longer whispered. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Tiberius, once the lion of Rome, now lay rotting in his own paranoia. His body wasted, his mind unraveling, and at his side stood the boy he thought he had shaped Caligula. But Caligula had not been shaped. He had been forged. The moment Tiberius's breath grew shallow, the palace fell into motion. Servants murmured. The Praetorians stiffened. Macro, ever watchful, nodded once. And Caligula simply waited. Some say Tiberius died in peace. Others say he lingered, gasping, before being smothered by command. But Caligula never spoke of it. He left the room in silence. Behind him, the age of Tiberius crumbled. Ahead of him, the empire opened its arms. That night, he walked the marble halls one last time, halls where ghosts whispered his father's name, where his mother's tears once fell unseen. The busts of emperors stared down at him. Augustus, Julius, Tiberius. He stared back. The boy who had arrived in chains was leaving as Caesar. A boat was prepared. The sea was quiet. Dawn hovered over the horizon like a held breath. As Caligula stepped onto the vessel, He looked back only once. Not in longing, not in sorrow, but in silent promise. Capri had made him. Rome would now answer to him. The people had waited long for joy, long for vengeance, long for Germanicus's sun to rise. And as the oars dipped into the water, Caligula whispered into the breeze, "The boy is dead. The emperor awakens." Before the marble steps of empire, there were gardens, soft laughter, and a boy who once believed in love. Caligula had not yet worn the crown when he wed Junia Claudia, the daughter of the powerful senator Marcus Junius Silanus. She was beautiful not just in face, but in the calm she brought him. In a world of venom and knives, she was a rare silence. Their union, arranged by Tiberius, began as political ceremony, but behind the closed doors of the Domus Palatina, it slowly became something more. Caligula smiled with her, listened to poetry, walked the flowered hills of the Palatine like any Roman groom, and yet, always a shadow. For Junia was not the only woman who stirred his soul. There was Drusilla, his sister, closest in age and spirit, raised together, exiled together, survived together. Some said they loved too deeply, others whispered darker things, but what is known is this: Drusilla was the only one who could silence his storms. Junia knew this, and still she stayed by his side, loyal, gentle. And when she grew swollen with child, Caligula touched her stomach with trembling hands. He believed just for a breath that peace might stay. But peace, in Rome, is a fragile bloom. Junia died giving birth, the child with her. No name survived, only silence. Caligula sat for hours beside her body, saying nothing. When the midwives came to collect her, he would not let them. He stayed until dawn, tracing the lines of her hand, whispering the poems they once shared. Rome mourned, politely, briefly, but something inside Caligula, something soft, turned to ash. He never remarried for love, only for war, for show, for power. Yet the memory of Junia never left him. In quiet nights, when the candles dimmed and the empire slept, he would sometimes ask servants to burn incense in her name. "Let the gods take her gently," he once said. "They owe me that." But Rome gives nothing gently, not even love. Grief never left Caligula, it only changed its mask. After Junia Claudila's death, love became conquest. Women became thrones, and marriage became theater. His second marriage, to Livia Orestilla, was scandalous even by Roman standards. She was newly wed to another man when Caligula saw her at a banquet. "Divorce him," he said in front of all. "Rome needs your womb." The next day, she did. The day after that, they were married. But Livia Orestilla did not love him. And within weeks, he cast her away, muttering about betrayal and omens. His heart, once bruised, was now armored. Next came Lolia Paulina, famed for her beauty and wealth. Caligula commanded her marriage dissolved and took her as his own. He wore her jewels, mocked her vanity, then tossed her aside as quickly as he claimed her. Each wife, a shadow. Each union, a stage play. But then came Melonia Sasonia. She was no blushing maiden. She was bold, earthy, older than the others, and pregnant by the time he married her. Rome gasped. But Caligula? He smiled. "At last," he said, "a woman not frightened of Rome, or me." I adored her. She matched his madness, whispered poisons sweetly into his ear, and dined with him even as the Senate plotted. Together, they had a daughter, Julia Drusilla, named after his beloved sister. For a time, he was content. There were festivals in her honor, silver statues made of mother and child. And yet, even Caesonia could not still the storm. Caligula's passion turned to obsession. He dressed her in pearls, forced her to appear naked before guests, laughed as she bathed in perfume meant for gods. He loved her too much. And Rome does not forgive such hunger. Behind palace walls, whispers grew. He marries whom he wants. He makes gods of his women. He is ruled by desire. But Caligula did not listen. He believed love could be controlled, that if he held it tightly enough, it would never leave. But love, like power, slips through fingers, and what remains is loneliness, dressed in gold. In the summer of his second year as emperor, the last tether to Caligula's heart was torn. Drusilla, his sister, his soul's echo, the one who knew him when he was only Gaius, fell ill. Rome heard whispers. Fever, poison, the gods reclaiming what man loved too much. Caligula did not leave her side. For 3 days, he refused to eat, refused to speak to his council, refused even to bathe. He sat beside her bed, brushing her hair back with shaking fingers, singing the lullabies their mother once sang on storm-tossed ships. On the 4th day, her breathing slowed. At sunset, she was gone. And with her, the last ember of Gaius flickered out. What followed was not mourning, but mania. Caligula declared Drusilla a goddess. He named her Diva Drusilla, daughter of Venus, sister of Mars, eternal light of Rome. Temples were ordered, statues carved. Her name was written beside Juno's in prayers. He forced the Senate to accept her deification. He wore her image on his rings. He made offerings at her altar each night. And when people asked why, he answered only, "Because she loved me without condition." Without her, his marriages became colder. His daughter, Julia Drusilla, was a pale reflection he could not bear to hold for long. The palace grew darker. He wandered its halls alone, speaking to her ghost. And when storms rolled across the Tiber, he would stand in the rain, face to the heavens, daring the gods to take him too. Love had left him, not quietly, not kindly. It had died in his arms, and all that remained was obsession. He once whispered to a servant in the torchlight, "She was the only one who saw the boy in me. Now, only Caesar remains." Drusilla's death was the breaking point. After that, the mask of Rome's beloved son cracked, and the monster stepped out. No more affection, no more tenderness, only memory and rage. The steps to power are rarely walked in daylight. More often, they are climbed in silence, shadow by shadow. And so it was with Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, son of the great Germanicus, child of Agrippina the elder. Rome once cheered for the boy in soldier's boots. But by the time he stepped into public life, the boy had learned to speak softly and bow deeply. Especially in the presence of Tiberius, the old emperor who had watched his father die. Tiberius summoned him to the island of Capri, a place wrapped in rumor and ruin. There, amid marble halls and fear-drenched servants, Caligula learned the game. He did not speak out. He did not rebel. He survived. And in those years of quiet obedience, Tiberius watched him. "This young serpent," he once murmured, "nourishes a viper in Rome." But still, he kept him close. For the boy reminded Tiberius of Germanicus golden, loved, tragic. And when Rome forgot how to love emperors, it still loved that name. In public, Caligula attended games and ceremonies. In private, he read philosophy, studied rhetoric, and wrote secret speeches. He visited his father's tomb often, kneeling before the resting place of Germanicus. "They loved you," he whispered once, "but they killed you anyway." Vengeance brewed, but it was steeped in patience. At 25, the boy who once wore soldiers' shoes walked again into the Roman Forum, but now in the colors of Caesar. Crowds gathered, they cheered the name. "Caligula, Caligula," and he smiled. He made speeches calm, clever, carefully crafted to comfort old senators and stir the hearts of the people. He promised to restore dignity, to honor his father's legacy, and behind his eyes burned a fire long contained. "Rome," he said once to a friend in confidence, will kneel before the house of Germanicus, and if it does not, it will burn." Tiberius, distant and aging, began to fade, and the court whispered, "When the old lion dies, what will the cub become?" Caligula remained still, waiting, watching, but his footsteps were already echoing in the halls of power. It was spring on the island of Capri. The sea murmured below. The marble halls were quiet, too quiet, and within a shadowed chamber, Tiberius lay dying. Some said he struggled for days. Others claimed he died and returned, only to be sent back again. What is known as this? On the final morning, Caligula stood at the foot of his bed. The emperor's breath rattled like old parchment, eyes half-lidded, fingers twitching. And beside the bed stood Macro, commander of the Praetorian Guard. Tiberius had made no official declaration, no clear air, but the people and the power leaned toward the son of Germanicus. When the emperor's chest finally stilled, a physician leaned close and nodded. A long silence. But then, Tiberius gasped. A final breath. Eyes opened. A curse. Caligula did not move, but Macro pushed the pillow gently over the old lion's face. Rome would not wait for doubt. And when it was done, Caligula was Caesar. Not by divine thunder, not by thunderous acclamation, but by whispers and a pillow. The next day, the Praetorians bowed. Macro crowned him in secret. Senators offered cautious words. But the people erupted in joy. The son of Germanicus, the light returns. Rome had suffered under the cold stare of Tiberius too long. Now they saw youth, smiles, hope. The forum overflowed. Laurel crowns rained from balconies. Trumpets wept golden sound into the marble streets. Statues were cleaned. Coins were struck with his face. And Caligula, the boy they had once nicknamed for his boots, became divine. He walked through the temple of Jupiter, clad in white. He laid offerings at the altar of Augustus, and whispered, "You crowned yourself. Now I wear the sun." But behind the veil of joy, the wind already stirred strange things. And Rome, so quick to rejoice, did not yet know what it had welcomed. And so the sun rose over Rome, golden and trembling with joy. The morning veil of Tiberius had not yet cooled, but already the people cried, "Hail Caligula, hail Caesar!" For they did not see a boy. They saw Germanicus reborn. On the steps of the temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, Caligula knelt. Senators in white robes gathered behind him. Priests lifted sacred laurel, and the people below filled the Capitoline hill like waves crashing into marble. The coronation began. Prayers were offered to the gods. Trumpets roared. A white dove was released, circling overhead 3 times a sign from the heavens. And when the crown was placed, Rome erupted. Laurel leaves rained from rooftops. Bells rang from temples across the 7 hills. Fires were lit on every altar. And in that moment, Caligula smiled. He stepped forward to the rostra, that ancient speaker's platform carved with ship prows. The same place where Cicero once roared and Augustus once declared peace. His voice was clear, sweet as olive oil. "Romans," he said, "the darkness is past. The gods have returned their favor." The crowd wept. Women held their children aloft. Veterans of Germanicus's legions pounded their chests. That night, Rome did not sleep. Dancers whirled in the forum. Wine flowed like the Tiber. Poets recited verses by torchlight. And Caligula, radiant in golden chariot, was drawn through the city behind 4 white horses. He waved to the masses. Beside him stood a statue of his father Germanicus carried on a litter of silver. The people called out blessings. "Long live Caesar! Long live the son of Germanicus!" In the skies, fireworks burst 100 stars reborn. Senators, for now, bowed low. And the people believed, truly believed, that Rome had been given a god in the flesh. But even gods wear masks. And beneath the laurel, the shadows were already beginning to stir. For history has never been kind to gods who walk among mortals. The throne was his. But thrones, like gods, are never free from fear. Though the people loved him still, the Senate stirred with unease. For behind every cheer was the echo of envy. Behind every laurel, the rustle of a knife. Caligula, now emperor, sat upon the curule chair, wrapped in a robe of purest white. Before him, the same senators who had bowed to Augustus and schemed beneath Tiberius. Some were loyal, some were silent, and some, like Cassius Longinus, Marcus Lepidus, and Cornelius Lentulus Gaetulicus, were already watching him too closely. He proposed games, reforms, amnesties. He returned exiles. But in his words, the Senate heard something else. Power unchecked. He is a boy, they whispered. Too young, too loved, too dangerous. Behind closed doors, scrolls were sealed. Names written. Watchmen bribed. Spies bought. Even in his own palace, Caligula felt their eyes. They do not serve Rome, he once muttered to his sister Drusilla. They serve memory, and I am not the past. He would meet them in the Senate, smiling, serene, but each visit became shorter. His speeches more curt. The laurel upon his brow no longer felt divine. It felt hunted. One night, he walked alone through the forum, stopping at the foot of Augustus's statue. Did they fear you too? He asked aloud. Rome offered no reply. But behind him, footsteps whispered across the stones. He began to see betrayal in every face, even his friends, even family. The early months of his reign, once filled with celebration, now soured. The games he ordered felt hollow. The Senate grew colder, and somewhere, deep inside, a fury began to bloom. Not loud, not thunderous, but quiet, controlled, waiting. If Rome does not love me, Caligula whispered, then let Rome learn to kneel. And so, the boy who once rode among petals, now stepped into power with a sword beneath his robe, and a silence, louder than any cheer. It began with a fever, a chill that climbed his spine one morning and refused to leave. Rome waited outside his palace gates, but within the marble walls, all was still. Caligula, once radiant as Apollo, now lay pale upon a bed of silks, his mouth dry, his dreams wild. For 30 days and nights, the empire held its breath. Priests wept before Jupiter. Senators promised temples if he survived. And the people the same who cheered him so lit lamps in their homes and whispered prayers. At his bedside, only one remained always. His beloved sister, Drusilla. She pressed cool cloths to his brow. She whispered stories of their childhood. And sometimes, when his eyes opened, he would call her not sister, but goddess. Then one morning he rose, alive, but changed. The boy who once laughed at the races no longer laughed. He moved through the palace with silence in his feet and a storm behind his eyes. He ordered statues of the gods to be brought into his chambers. He demanded their faces be replaced with his own. He began to refer to himself as Neos Helios, the new sun. And worse still, he whispered to his guards, I have conquered death, therefore I am no longer mortal. The Senate grew uneasy. They visited his palace with forced smiles. He would greet them barefoot, draped in golden silk, calling himself Jupiter's son. He mocked their rituals. He laughed at their concern. Do not mourn the boy who was sick, he said. He has died. I am something new. And behind those walls, something was reborn. Note divine. Not monstrous, but something untethered. A man without fear. A god without boundary. A ruler who had looked death in the face and chosen to smile. His sister, Drusilla, alone, could calm him. But even she began to tremble, for he no longer called her by her name. He called her Venus. And all Rome, watching from afar, began to whisper, "The emperor is touched by the gods, or by madness." And madness in Rome was more feared than war. She had been his star, his sister, his goddess, his only peace. And then she was gone. Drusilla, light of Caligula's darkening world, fell ill, suddenly and violently. No priest could save her. No offering moved the gods. On a gray summer's evening, she breathed her last within the Palatine palace. And the heavens, it seemed, grew quiet. The boy who once danced beneath Rome's laurel arches now sank to the floor beside her bier and did not rise. He did not eat. He did not speak. For days he remained at her side, stroking her hair, whispering her name, calling her Venus Genetrix, as if she might open her eyes again. Rome mourned, but Caligula did not mourn crashed. Then came the decree. Let all weep, for Drusilla is now divine. Statues were sculpted in her image, temples raised, a new goddess in Rome's pantheon, not of Olympus, but of grief. And still he raged. Those who smiled in the Senate, exiled. Those who questioned her divinity, executed. He began walking through the imperial gardens in black mourning robes, speaking to the air. "She is still here," he would whisper. He ordered senators to offer sacrifices to her spirit, and refused to appear in public unless her statue stood beside him. He had tasted death once before, and returned. But this was worse. For no god could undo it. No power could bring her back. And so, he turned that power outward. He began accusing friends of treason. Even Marcus Lepidus, once close, was put to death, his bones crushed before the Senate's eyes. "Let Rome know my grief," Caligula said. "Let no man be unscarred by it." The people, once devoted, grew afraid. Their bright young emperor had become something else. Not a man, not a god, but grief-walking, fury-breathing. The golden streets of Rome grew colder. Drusilla's temples burned with incense, and Caligula's name, once sung with joy, now echoed through the city like a warning. In the palace halls, whispers began. He has lost her, and with her, himself. But Caligula heard only silence. And in that silence, a crown of madness was quietly placed upon his brow. The gods had walked among mortals before, or so the myths told. But now, Rome watched as a mortal became myth. Caligula was no longer simply emperor. He was Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. From his palace on the Palatine Hill, he reigned with splendor and spectacle. Statues of Jupiter and Mars were redressed with his features. Even Apollo's lyre, once sacred to the sun god, was rumored to have been placed in his own private shrine. He extended Rome's boundaries not by war, but by declaring dominion over reality. "If men can fear gods," he said, "then let them fear me more." Temples rose, not for deities, but for him. The temple of Caligula, the Eternal, opened its doors, adorned with gold leaf and pearl mosaics. Inside, the emperor sat atop a gilded throne, receiving offerings. Foreign ambassadors, terrified and confused, offered tributes. To the living God, they proclaimed, or risk insult and death. Rome, once ruled by men who bowed to gods, now bowed to a man who claimed to be one. And yet, behind the grand performances, there pulsed a storm. Caligula spoke often of voices only he could hear. of dreams he believed were sent by divinity. He built bridges not over rivers, but over gods. At Baiae, he constructed a floating bridge across the sea. Thousands of boats lashed together, just so he might ride across as Xerxes once did. Rome must see her god walk on water, he declared. And Rome did, cheering, trembling, not knowing if they applauded or pleaded. His appetite grew insatiable. For praise, for power, for proof that no one, not even fate, could say no to him. He began appointing his horse, Incitatus, to public office. He is more loyal than a senator, Caligula smiled. And the court laughed carefully. Beneath the gold, behind the divine mask, something was unraveling. But Rome could not yet see it. For in this act, the curtain was still rising. The god emperor stood center stage, and the world still watched in awe. He had conquered Rome. But the sea remained unbroken. And so, Caligula, god emperor of Rome, turned his gaze north, toward the shores of Britannia, that misty island whispered of in legends. He gathered legions along the coast of Gaul, summoned ships, trained men, fed the rumors of a divine invasion. But what followed was not war. It was theater. For Caligula did not cross. He declared war on Neptune, the god of the sea. He drew his sword to the waves, raised his banners to the sky, and ordered his soldiers to collect seashells, trophies of his victory. "Tell the Senate," he said with a gleam in his eye, "that I have conquered the ocean." And so, a triumph was held. Horses paraded through Rome. Priests burned incense to honor the sea's defeat. And the people watched, confused. Was it satire? Madness? Or godhood misunderstood? For Caligula, the world was no longer a map to be redrawn by conquest. It was a stage upon which he acted myth. Still, the legions grumbled. The generals whispered. His military commander in the east, Cassius Chaerea, began to question the emperor's path. Meanwhile, in Judea, Caligula demanded his statue be placed within the Second Temple, sparking fury across the empire. "All gods shall bow to Rome," he declared, "and I am Rome." But when faced with revolt, he hesitated and quietly withdrew the order. A rare moment of pause, or perhaps a rare flicker of self-doubt. His reign teetered between myth and mockery, divinity and delusion. Even his allies Macro, the man who once raised him, had been discarded, exiled, swallowed by the growing maw of imperial paranoia. Still, Caligula smiled. Still, he stood atop balconies and declared the sun his brother. Still, the empire obeyed. For now. But the seashells he claimed as spoils grew brittle beneath Rome's weight. And beneath the pageantry, the marble was starting to crack. He was emperor, but more than emperor, he was the storm wrapped in silk. As Caligula's reign entered its zenith, Rome stood awestruck in the heat of his glory, and trembled beneath the weight of his unpredictability. The Senate, once proud, became silent courtiers, offering praise with every breath, and hiding daggers behind every smile. Caligula knew. He watched them like a lion surrounded by lambs, who might grow teeth. His palace expanded, adorned in imported marble from Numidia and Egypt. The stadium of Gaius, his gift to the people, rose near the Palatine. Chariots raced in his honor, and crowds roared his name like a hymn. And yet, in private, Caligula grew quiet. He would wander the corridors of his palace late at night, whispering to statues as if they whispered back, "Do you love me, Jupiter? Do you envy me, Mars?" He feared sleep, for in sleep the gods returned to reclaim what he had borrowed. Thunder would strike above the Capitoline, and he'd shudder not from fear, but rage. "Let me strike back," he once cried, and ordered a false thunder machine be constructed. To rival Jupiter's roar, it was built, a great bronze contraption, hidden above the theater, clapping drums and iron sheets to mimic the gods. Rome clapped too, but laughter now tinged with unease. His sister Drusilla, once his anchor, had died. Caligula mourned, as if a widow, declared her divine, and made offerings to her spirit. "She was the moon to my sun," he whispered. Some say he never recovered. Others say he never returned at all. He surrounded himself with guards not for glory, but for fear. The Praetorian Guard, once his protectors, now watched him with colder eyes. Rumors of plots churned in the forum like autumn leaves. Cassius Caria, once insulted by Caligula's cruelty, had begun to whisper with others. Senators, aides, even palace servants. Caligula felt it. The walls listening, the marble pulsing, and yet he smiled still, for he believed he could not die. "A god does not bleed," he once said. But Rome had seen gods fall before, and this one had no more lightning to throw. The throne stood taller than ever, but beneath its golden legs, a serpent coiled. Caligula had turned gods into jesters, and senators into furniture. But men are not marble, and laughter can hide a blade. In the dim corners of Rome's palaces, the air changed. Whispers sharpened like knives. Names passed like poison. Cassius Chaerea, Cornelius Sabinus, Lucius Annius Venetianus, and more. All men once loyal, all men now afraid. Chaerea, mocked for a limp wrist, had borne Caligula's jeers too long. "Woman, weakling," the emperor had laughed. But pride, once pierced, becomes flame. And Cariastoic, calculating, planned with the precision of a soldier. The plot was simple. Strike when Caligula was most vulnerable. During the Palatine Games, when he would walk the passage between the theater and his chambers, alone with few guards. Rome itself seemed to turn its gaze away, as the conspirators met behind tapestries and beneath marble domes. Some joined out of rage, others from fear, some perhaps from hope. They remembered what Rome had been, what it could be again. Meanwhile, Caligula grew quieter, have felt eyes. He began to sleep less, eat less. He muttered to shadows, consulted omens, and once stared into a pool so long, the reflection no longer matched him. "They fear me," he whispered to his reflection, "and so they must love me." The Praetorian Guard, once his shield, now stood stiff and silent. Their loyalty eroded coin by coin, and Caligulians dazzling, once divine, seemed tired. His wife, Melonia Sasonia, stayed close, whispering comfort, holding his trembling hands beneath the feast table. And his newborn daughter, Julia Drusilla, named for the sister he worshipped, became his only softness. He kissed her forehead each morning, and promised the stars would be hers. But stars cannot save us from what waits behind doors. For beneath Rome's marble veins, in candlelit conspiracies, the knife had already been drawn, and soon it would taste blood. The Palatine Games. Laughter rang across the marble arches. Trumpets sang. Dancers spun. Rome looked away, and in that blink, history cracked. Caligula stood, clothed in purple and gold, the laurels of divinity circling his head. He smiled, not knowing that this would be the last time his lips would do so. Below the theater, A tunnel ran between performance and palace. A passage built for safety now turned to ambush. The conspirators waited in shadowed silence. Cassius Caria stood among them, face unriadable. His sword was clean, but not for long. Caligula descended the stairway with only a few attendants, chatting softly, unguarded, distracted. One whispered something humorous. Caligula laughed. And then, steel. The first blow struck his neck, and his eyes widened in disbelief. "I'm still alive," he screamed, staggering backwards. But the knives came again, and again, and again. His guards froze. The loyal few fled. The rest turned their faces. "Strike the actor," someone cried. And the curtain fell. Milonia Caisonia, hearing screams, ran. Julia in her arms, sandals slapping against marble. She found only blood and silence. "You fools," she sobbed. "You've killed your god." The conspirators, bloodied, looked down at the broken form. Once Jupiter made flesh, now mortal, now motionless. His body was hidden at first, hurried away in blankets. But word spread through Rome like fire through dry reeds. Caligula is dead. Some cheered, some wept, most watched the skies. For if gods could fall, who would protect them? In the days that followed, chows erupted. Senators declared Rome freed. But the Praetorian Guard had other plans. They found Caligula's uncle, a quiet, stuttering scholar named Claudius, hiding behind a curtain. They dragged him out and crowned him. Rome did not mourn long, but some did. The wife, the daughter, and those who remembered the laughter. Before it turned to thunder, he was gone. But Rome had not finished bleeding. Milonia Caesonia, his wife, once his comfort, his madness, his tether to love, did not run. She clutched Julia Drusilla, their child, and whispered lullabies through tears. "They will come," she said, rocking the infant beneath the broken eagle standard. "They always come." And they did. Soldiers grime, quiet, eyes lowered. Not with rage, but duty. Rome feared the child. The name. The blood. It had tasted empire once. It could thirst again. "Forgive them," Milonia whispered, as the blade descended. "They forget that gods are born of men." The imperial line was severed, brutally and cleanly. Statues of Caligula were toppled. Coins melted. His name scratched from scrolls and marble. The Senate proclaimed damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. Rome would forget. But marble holds memories. No hammer can silence. In hidden villas, old slaves wept for the boy they'd once bathed. In distant Provence, governors still hesitated at the name. And in the Palatine, servants swore they heard his laughter echo from shadowed hallways. Some whispered that he had not died, but ascended, that he had fooled death, as he had fooled Rome. Others said he walked among the stars, where gods belonged. Claudius, his uncle, now wore the purple, cautious, unsure, every decree heavy with fear. He outlawed cruelty in the games, banned gladiatorial executions, opened libraries. Rome sighed grateful, uncertain. But, deep within the city, a shrine still held a small statue, worn with time. Caligula, as a boy, his sister Drusilla beside him, 2 children frozen in innocence, before thrones, crowns, and knives. And so, the god emperor passed from memory. But the question he left remained. What happens when men make gods of their worst fears? The empire would ask it again and again. Rome had wept, but Rome had also marveled. For in Caligula's fevered reign, beauty was born. From madness, he commanded the sea, ordered it to bear his weight. At Baiae, across the wide bay, he built a bridge, not of stone, but of ships, anchored and bound together, stretching over 2 miles. Let the gods watch me walk where they said I could not, he declared. And, in the armor of Alexander the Great, he rode his horse incitatus from shore to shore. Some called it vanity, others prophecy, but all remembered it. He filled Rome with spectacles, a golden house, floating palaces at Lake Nemi, ships so vast and adorned, they seemed temples drifting on water. Each ship held marble floors, bronze anchors, statues of gods, and ceilings painted with stars. If I cannot dwell on Olympus, he said, I shall build it below. He ordered a lighthouse at Boulogne, guiding trade and legions across the northern sea. In Gaul, aqueducts. In Numidia, roads. Gold flowed, wine poured, and Rome grew strange and splendid. His madness reached the heavens, ordering temples for himself, placing his bust among gods. But he also repaired ancient sanctuaries, rebuilt fallen theaters, honored forgotten rites. He raised pensions for fire brigades, distributed grain, forgave debts, a contradiction in flesh. His horse was to be consul, yes, but incitatus lived in a marble stable, fed from an ivory trough. Caligula once said, "Let all of Rome be marble." And though he died before his vision stood complete, the hammers did not stop. Architects remembered. Builders followed. His tastes shaped a generation of imperial grandeur. Even those who cursed him borrowed his aesthetic. Rome shimmered with absurd brilliance, a paradox of dust and gold. And long after he was gone, whispers passed through craftsmen's guilds. That dome, Caligula thought of one first. That bridge, he dreamed it. Madness may pass, but marble remains. His temples were torn down, his statues shattered, his name cursed by decree. Yet still, in the hidden corners of empire, some remembered. Beneath villas in Pompeii, soft-footed women lit lamps before statues of the emperor they once called God. They did not speak his name aloud, but they whispered thanks for the grain he once gave, the debts he once forgave, the roads that led their sons home. Caligula the mad? Perhaps. But also Caligula the generous, the builder, the storm that passed and watered the earth behind it. In Antioch, merchants spoke of the markets. He revived. In Lugdunum, children learned Latin. In schools he founded. And at the far edge of Mauritania, a forum still bore his column. Erase him, the Senate had said, but stone remembers. What scrolls forget? Some temples, once rededicated, still bore his image. Hidden in friezes, tucked in mosaics, a divine boy with laurel curls, standing between Mars and Mercury, anonymous, but familiar. And in dreams, old priests saw him seated among the stars, laughing softly, beside Jupiter himself. Madness had no temple, but memory did. The people remembered the bridge across the sea, the ships with starlit ceilings, the god who wept, and raged, and built. Even the mad leave legacies. Even the feared are loved by someone. Rome, for all its marble and order, was always made of contradiction. And in the cracks between decree and silence, Caligula endured, in laughter by firelight, in stories told to frighten children, in dreams of impossible splendor, the emperor who made the sea a road, and the stars his ceiling, was never truly erased, just hidden, like the divine often are. Time moved on. Empires grew. Names changed. But Caligula remained. Not in power, but in shadow. In the Senate, they cursed him. Let his name be struck from all records. But their words could not undo the path he had carved into marble. The bridge was gone. The ships of Lake Nemi sunk. But beneath the water, their bones still glinted in moonlight. Builders whispered of his madness, with awe, not scorn. He imagined things we feared to try. Even Hadrian, the great architect emperor, studied sketches that began with Caligula's fevered dreams. A dome over the world, a palace upon the water, an empire made not of war, but of vision. These were not the ideas of a fool. Rome laughed when he made his horse a priest, but they copied his rituals. When storms threatened crops, they mocked his floating temples, and later built libraries that drifted over canals. He made mistakes, cruel, senseless, unforgivable ones. But even his cruelty shaped the Senate, forced it to reckon with its impotence. After him, emperors ruled with caution, fearing the shadow of his wildness. He taught them where the limits lay, and beyond those limits, brilliance still flickered. Poets spoke of him as a tragic figure, a young god corrupted by power too soon. The moon kissed him mad, one wrote, and Rome paid the price for touching a star. Even the people, long after his name was banned, kept his image alive in mosaics, not as impure, but as myth. In one corner of the empire, an old man still fished, near where the bridge once stood. He walked across the sea, he told a child, not because he was mad, but because he believed Rome could do anything. The child asked, "Did it fall because of him?" The man shook his head. "No, child, it changed. And sometimes, change looks like madness, before it becomes memory." The waves whispered softly, and beneath them, marble dreams still slept. Once he stood radiant, the sun rising behind his shoulders. Now, shadows clung to him, like a second toga. The halls of Palatine Hill grew keener. Courtiers bowed deeper, but their eyes no longer shone with awe, only calculation. Caligula had outlasted storms, riots, conspiracies, but his flame, so wildly bright, began to flicker. Dreams once vibrant turned brittle. He no longer raced across marble floors, laughing with his sisters, for they were gone. Drusilla, his soul, buried too young. Agrippina and Livilla, exiled, whispered of revolt. His wife, Caesonia, was loyal but tired. She watched him with eyes that had once adored, now only feared. Rome murmured. Too much gold, too much blood, too many gods. He made new laws in the night, strange edicts, cruel whims. He stared at the moon, and spoke to it like a friend. He feared shadows behind curtains. He feared his own guard. Even Macro, his once ally, had turned away, and was already dead by the blade. Caligula had ordered. The Praetorians, once his shield, now watched him as one watches, a sick animal. Behind palace doors, the Cassius Caria plot began. "He mocks us," they whispered. He calls us women. He strikes us in public. He is not a god, he is a disease. Caligula laughed too loudly, trusted too little, and dined with those who plotted his end. On the Ides of January, the stars were quiet. He walked the cryptoporticus, a dim corridor beneath the palace, flanked by men he did not love. And though he smiled, he felt it. Something ending, something slipping from the tips of his fingers. He paused before a statue of Augustus. "Will they love me like you?" he asked. Silence. The gods no longer answered. It was the 24th day of January, in the year 41 after Christ. Rome stood beneath a gray sky. Caligula awoke with a strange calm, the kind that comes before a storm. He spoke gently to Caesarea, touched his daughter's curls. "They do not see the god in me," he whispered. "They will." The day began with a festival, the Palatine Games. He watched actors perform, laughed when none else dared. He made crude jokes at Cassius Chaerea, called him woman, mocked his voice. Behind the curtain, Chaerea's fist clenched. "He forgets I carry a sword." At noon, Caligula rose to pass through the cryptoporticus, a cool passage beneath the palace. Praetorian guards followed, not as protectors, but as wolves in disguise. And there, beneath frescoed ceilings and echoing arches, Rome's living god was struck. Once, then again, and again. "I still live," he screamed, but no hand reached to help. Cassius Chaerea, once his officer, drove the fatal blade into his chest. Caligula fell. His eyes met a flickering torch, and saw, for the last time, the painted face of Jupiter. On the ceiling above, silence swallowed him. Outside, Caesonia heard shouts. She knew. She wrapped her arms around little Julia Drusilla, stood before the guards. "Strike me if you must," she said. They did. Mother and daughter fell. Moments after the emperor, no gods came to save them. No thunder split the sky. The Senate rejoiced, whispering, "Rome is free again." But even they could not fully smother the weight of what had passed. Rome had killed a god, or a man who believed himself one. Either way, the echo would last, longer than the blood. He died as emperors rarely do, not in glory, but in dust and silence. His body was not given a triumphal farewell. No golden bier, no long procession, just a shadowed escape. 2 loyal servants carried what remained of Caligula to the gardens of Lamia. There, beneath olive trees, they lit a pyre. Flames crackled softly. Ash rose into the night air, mingling with the scent of rosemary and forgotten oaths. His wife, Caesonia, and child, Julia Drusilla, were buried nearby. No marker, no inscription. Rome turned its face away. The Senate moved quickly. Edicts were passed. Statues were toppled. Names were struck from scrolls and coins. The people whispered his name, only in shadow. "Let no trace of the mad god remain," they said. But memory is stubborn. In secret corners, some wept. A few still believed he had truly been touched by divinity, that his madness was not disease, but revelation, that Rome had killed, a mirror of itself. In years to come, his story would grow monstrous. Caligula, the lunatic. Caligula, the tyrant. Caligula, the beast. Yet buried beneath the tales of horror were fragments of truth. A lonely child, crowned too soon, a soul shattered by grief, a dreamer who mistook gods for friends. His legacy would echo, not in marble arches or laws, but in whispers, in every ruler who asked, "How much power can one heart bear before it breaks?" In the hush of the forum, when moonlight falls on cracked pedestals, in the ruins where ivy clings to the name Gaius. And so ended the reign of Caligula. Gaius, born a child of promise, crowned by chaos and buried by fear. The years passed, like leaves falling from forgotten laurels, and Rome, that eternal city, carried on. The forum echoed with new voices. New emperors rose. New wars were fought. But somewhere in the marble cracks, the name Caligula still lingered, hidden, whispers behind pillars, carved faintly on broken busts. The Senate had tried to erase him, and yet history remembered. Cassius Dio wrote of him. So did Suetonius. Tacitus hinted. Aish retelling blurred the man and birthed the myth. The monster, the madman, the murdered god. In every tale, a different mask. But beneath them all, a young boy in armor, longing for his father, longing to be loved. Some say his madness was divine punishment, others a sickness of grief. Still others whisper that Rome itself created Caligula, fed him worship, and then turned the blade. What monuments remain? Not many. A few scattered coins, bearing his boyish face, a broken statue in Antium, echoes of temples never finished. But Rome does not forget. It remembers in silence, in the cracked pavement, where emperors once marched, in the breeze through empty forums, in the gold dust that clings to old marble, and in the stories told when candles flicker and sleep pulls gently. Caligula, Gaius, a name too wild to vanish, a life too strange to silence, for history keeps even its nightmares, folded gently in parchment and stone. History is not fair, nor does it whisper kindly to those it fears. Caligula was remembered, not as a man, but a mirror, a reflection of Rome's excess, its hunger, its gods made of flesh. And yet, in the quiet corners of the world, his story softened. By the 3rd century, children in Alexandria would whisper of the golden ghost, who walked palace halls by moonlight. By the 5, monks copying scrolls would pause at his name, uncertain whether to curse or weep. Gaius. Some still called him, not Caligula, not monster, just Gaius, a boy who had once worn a soldier's boots, too large for his feet. In art, he faded. In law, he vanished. But stories endured. Tales of seas commanded to kneel, of gods to feed, of laughter that echoed, far too loud, in empty temples. Scholars debated him. For centuries, was he mad? Or did madness wear the face? Rome asked of him, was it grief that unstitched his soul? Or power? What do we do with men who dream beyond their bodies? What is history but a chorus of memory, arguing with silence? Perhaps Caligula was never meant to be understood. Perhaps his truth lies not in scrolls or ruins, but in the unease he leaves behind. Rome has known greater emperors, wiser ones, more beloved. But few cast such a long shadow, and fewer still returned to the earth, wearing a crown no one could see, but everyone feared. The gods are quiet now. The laurel leaves fall slowly. The story is ending now. Dear listener, the fires have cooled. The voices have faded. The empire, even Rome, breathes slower. And somewhere in the hills beyond memory, a boy once called Gaius walks barefoot beneath silver stars. His crown lies behind him. So do his madness, his fury, and his dreams. What remains is Kieter. You will not find many temples bearing his name, no proud statue towers in his honor. Yet when the wind brushes old marble, it sometimes whispers, Caligula. And even now, if you walk alone in the forum at night, you might hear footsteps, too soft for sandals, too slow for fear. He ruled for just 4 years, and yet he haunts centuries. The memory of Caligula, Gaius, is like a ghost in Rome's garden, not screaming, but humming. Some see a monster, some a warning, others a tragic boy, lost beneath a crown. But now his name rests in the folds of history. The scrolls are closed, the frescoes are cracked, and the empire, the mighty Roman Empire, sleeps a little deeper for having known him. So let the moon cover his footsteps. Let time wrap him in olive branches. Let the silence keep his secrets. And so, Caligula became one with the hush of the past. His voice is gone, but if you listen, truly listen, the wind still sighs his name. Through the ruins of the Roman Empire, sleep well now. Let time carry you away. Let the dream of marble and shadow cradle your rest. It's over. It's all over now.